Okay, so these notes go with how to calculate speed and velocity, but then also if you don't get a distance or a time, how to calculate the distance or the time if it's in a speed and velocity problem. Okay, so you do not have to take these notes right now. These are notes that are already in your packet. So remember speed and then velocity. Speed is V, velocity is V hat, okay? Because it has a hat on it, it has that extra dimension of direction, okay? So for speed, we calculate it using the distance divided by time, okay? And you're obviously gonna have units with that, so it's magnitude in units. But then for velocity, it's going to be V hat, distance divided by time, and then it's gonna be plus a direction. And as a reminder, your direction can be things like north, south, east, west. It could also be rightward, leftward, up, or down. It just has to have some kind of direction. Okay. So the first note we're going to take, and y'all, we really only have to do this with one of them, speed or velocity. The only thing we're going to add with velocity is direction. Okay, so we're going to just do this with speed for now. So the formula for speed is V equals distance divided by time, okay? Yep, we'll start with these notes. Okay. When you're reading your word problem, I know it's really easy to just see like a large number and say, oh, that's always gonna go on the top, or a small number and that's always gonna go on the bottom. But make sure when you're putting in your distance and your time, it makes sense. Distance, 100 kilometers, 100 meters. Time, 100 hours, 100 seconds, okay? So, if we're solving for speed, it's really easy. You just put the distance up there and divide by the time, okay? But what happens if you get a velocity and you don't know your distance or you don't know your time? Okay, so first thing I'm going to show you is kind of like the cheater way. You could have learned it from middle school. We might have gone over it a little bit last year when we were doing some stuff. We'll see. Okay, so if you draw a triangle, okay, and separate that triangle into 3 equal pieces, okay? If you could put any formula in there that has 3 parts in the correct way, you can solve for anything. So, y'all see how distance is always over time? Okay, when you're putting that into the formula, you have to have the distance over the time. So the only way to do that is to have the distance up here, and it's over the time. So then velocity must be here. So, ready? Velocity equals distance divided by time, okay? Now, if you can get that to work, okay, so where anything across from each other like this is multiplied, okay? Anything above each other here would be like divided, okay? So now, just based on this triangle, if I was going to solve for velocity, velocity equals distance divided by time. Okay? Then if I was going to solve for distance, distance equals. Okay, so distance equals. What happens when the velocity is on the same level as the time? Multiply. Velocity times time. Okay? Now I'm going to solve for time equals. Okay. And what happens when the distance is over the velocity? Good. So time is distance divided by velocity. Okay? Write that down. That is kind of like the cheat method for anything, and it really does work. So copy that down. If you could remember that triangle, this next method we're going to do, cross multiplying, you don't have to do, but cross multiplying also works every single time. So this method works with any three formula, or cross multiplying works with any 3 variable formula. Anybody still copying? Okay, so real quickly, if I would do another triangle, you don't have to copy this one. Okay, one thing we're gonna learn later on when we're talking about forces is that force equals mass times acceleration. It's actually Newton's second law of motion. How would I put that in the triangle? So tell me, what would go on top? Okay, so I have an F and an M.
I love the F on the left.
F, F. Okay, so here's your hint. If mass and acceleration need to be multiplied,
They need to be side by side.
they need to be side by side. So, mass, acceleration, that would mean force would be on top. So, force equals mass times acceleration. What does mass equal?
Divided by F.
Good. What does A equal?
F divided by M.
Good. It works every single time if you put it in correctly. Okay, so I just want to prove to you that it works. Okay, so now let's go into the cross multiplication method. Like I said, you could pick the one that you like. The triangle works, but I will always check myself with cross multiplication. So, I'm going to put up here a very easy speed, distance, time numbers. So, speed equals distance divided by time. I'm just going to sub this in and just say for the rest of the problems, I want speed to equals 2 meters per second. Therefore, I need to somehow come up with numbers to equal 2. So I'm going to do 10 divided by 5. 10 meters divided by 5 seconds, okay? So, when we do our 3 ways, speed's always going to be 2, distance is always going to be 10, time is always going to be 5, okay? So, first one, speed equals distance divided by time, okay? So, if you only get, and what you always want to do is write speed equals distance equals time equals, you're always going to have to get 2 variables. So ready? I'm going to solve for speed. So my speed's my x, so I'm going to give you the other 2. Ready? Distance is 10 meters, time is 5 meters. Okay, so if you have this oops, sorry. 5 seconds. So if you have these 2 variables, the only thing you could sub in there is here, so here's your x. So ready, I'm gonna sub this in for this right here. Speed, which is my x, it could be x, whatever you wanna do, speed or x, equals distance, what's my distance? 10 meters divided by my time, 5 seconds, okay? Now, this is what I wanna say about using x. It's okay to use x for your whole thing, but your last operation that you circle needs to be what you're solving for in physics, okay? So if you go the whole way saying, oh, well, speed's my unknown, x, that last one that you circle for me, same as Feist, is my answer. It can't say x equals, you have to go back to your original question, so you have to write the v for speed. Oh, guys, I'm sorry, guys, I'm using s for speed instead of v. I'm going back to, I'm going back to IPC. Okay, so we have v, x, or v. So ready? So we have x equals, what is 10 divided by 5? 2 meters per second. But because we're solving for velocity, or speed, v equals 2 meters per second. Y'all, I know, I even get it mixed up sometimes, but in physics, we got to do v for speed. So you could use the x the whole time, or you could use the v, but whenever you solve, you have to have what you're solving for with the correct variable. Okay, that was easy, we just subbed in. Now let's solve for either D or T using cross multiplication. Anybody still copying? Okay. So once again, speed is distance divided by time. 2 meters per second equals 10 meters over 5 seconds. Okay, so now we're gonna use this formula, but here's our unknown. So we have speed, distance, time. Okay, we're gonna use distance as our unknown, okay? So we're gonna have 2 meters per second, and then time is going to be 5 seconds. So now, most of y'all are gonna say, okay, do I multiply 5 times 2, or do I divide 5 divided by 2, or do I divide 2 divided by 5? This is where if you have, I know I have the formula up there so you kind of know in your head, but if you only had 2 of them, a lot of y'all would be like, well, what do I do? So first thing we're gonna do is sub it into the formula, and then I'll show you how cross multiplication works. Okay, so if I sub it into the formula, just put it right here. Speed 2 meters per second equals distance. I don't have my distance divided by time. I've got 5 seconds. Okay, so that's what it looks like if you sub in and distance is your unknown. Okay. Now, if you cross multiply, you have to have a numerator and a denominator to cross. So guys, 2 is always the same as 2 over 1, okay? When you add that 1 to the denominator, now you have numerators and denominators to cross multiply. So ready? Cross multiplication, just like you do crisscross, you take these 2 and you put them right here. So what is x times 1? X equals, what is 2 meters per second times 5 seconds? 10. Now, if you are unsure of units, look at your original problem and say, okay, if I'm solving for distance, my unit should be in meters, but guys, look up here. Meters divided by seconds times seconds. The seconds will cross out. That's why seconds cross out, okay? So x is 10, but it's meters. Okay, can I circle x is 10 meters? Nope, I gotta do distance, because I'm solving for distance, equals 10 meters. Okay, and that's absolutely correct. So we're gonna do it one last time, solving for time. And I am gonna put in really wonky numbers so that I try to trick you. You have to do it either the triangle way or cross multiplication way, because if you just say I'm always gonna divide the higher number by the lower number, that's not gonna work. Okay, anybody still copying? Okay. So we got V equals distance divided by time. 2 meters per second equals 10 meters divided by 5 seconds. Okay, so the last thing we're gonna do is the time be our unknown. So ready? V equals, D equals, T equals. Okay, so when time is our unknown, you're gonna get your speed, 2 meters per second. You're gonna get distance, 10 meters. Okay, so first thing we do is write our formula and sub in. So, V equals D divided by T. Okay, so let's sub in. Our speed is 2 meters per second equals our distance, they gave it to us, 10 meters, but our time, that's our X, we don't know it, okay? So, first thing we do, just like we did, we add a 1 to the denominator, making everything have a numerator and denominator. Now we just cross multiply, okay? These two come across and go here. What is 10 meters times 1? Equals, what is 2 meters per second times x? 2 meters per second x, okay? Okay, now, if we want to get x by itself, because x is going to be our time, what do we have to divide both sides by? Not just 2.
2 meters, 2x.
2 meters per second, the whole thing. So guys, I just want to remind y'all, if you want to get x by itself,
You're laughing real hard for somebody who doesn't have a phone.
okay, so up here,
Okay, oh no.
okay, ready? We have this term here, and we have this term here, okay? If we want to get x by itself, we have to divide, guys, this whole term both sides, okay? So the only way to get rid of it all is divide this side by 2 meters per second and divide this side by 2 meters per second, okay? When you divide something by itself, this crosses out, okay? So that's why we're left with x equals, okay? 10 divided by 2 is easy, it's 5. And because meters are on the top and bottom, they cross out, and that's how we're left with seconds. Now, we can't circle x equals 5 seconds because that's not what we're solving for. So I'm just going to write it over here. T equals 5 seconds. So you've learned 2 ways to do it. One of them's a little bit of the triangle cheat way. The other one's cross multiply. Both ways work 100% of the time if you set them up properly. Okay, so now you're going to get a worksheet. We're only going to have 10 problems. We'll go over it tomorrow, but you're going to practice it. So for every one of these questions, I expect this. So this is what I want to see. Underneath every question, I want to see V equals, D equals, T equals. If they ask you for velocity, I want to see V hat equals, okay? So you need to fill all 3 of these in just to know which one you're solving for. Then you could do triangle method, or then you could do cross multiplication method, okay? So for example, Megan rolls a ball down a ramp that is 10 meters long. 10 meters is your distance. If it took 20 seconds, time. For the ball to hit the wall, then what's the ball's speed, okay? So it always sets you up with 2 knowns and 1 unknown. Okay, number 2 says, well, how much time does it take? Your time's going to be unknown. Number 3 says, what was the car's average speed? Speed's going to be the unknown. If an airplane travels a distance of blah, 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 what's its average speed? Easy peasy speed. But then it'll say, how long will it take? Time. How far did it travel? Make sure you know what you're solving for. Okay, so you have the rest of the period to do this. We'll go over it tomorrow.